Hello and welcome to the overview of Language Paper 2, which is our non-fiction paper. I'm going to talk you through each of the questions and give you an overall explanation of what they involve, and then we're going to have a go at the end at doing a question 1 response. So we're just going to start with a recap of Language Paper 1. What can we remember? So have a look in front of you. Try and fill in the gaps for me. So question 1, how many marks is it worth, and how many things you need to pick out for question 2, what are you analysing, so on and so forth. So pause the video now and have a go at this, and then we'll go through the answers. Okay, so question 1 is worth 4 marks. Your timings are approximately 5 minutes and you're picking out 4 different things. So 4 things from the text based on the question that you've been asked. Question 2 is worth 8 marks. You have around 12 minutes and you'll be analysing language. Question 3, 8 marks, another 12 minutes, analysing structure. Question 4, 20 marks, 20 minutes, evaluating a student's statement. And question 5 is worth 40 marks. You'll have around 45 minutes to answer it, and you'll either be writing a description or narrative. Narrative is just our terminology for story. Okay, so language versus literature. What is the difference? Have a little think what you think might be the differences between English literature and English language. So pause the video now and write down a couple of ideas. Okay, literature. You know the text in advance, but you do not know the questions. So we know we're going into the exam knowing that we are going to be writing about a certain text, so Macbeth, Inspector Calls, Jekyll and Hyde. We will know our quotations and we will know our analysis for those quotations off by heart, so we can recall them in the exam. We will not know the question. So we do not know what we're going to be writing about, but we know that we're going to be armed with our quotations so that we can answer any question that is thrown at us. Practicing your timing is very important because you will have a certain amount of time to answer this and you must stick to it so that you have enough time to go back and proofread your work. Language. You know the questions, but not the text in advance. So we know the questions. We've talked about Language Paper 1 questions. They follow a format. We know we're going to be talking about language. We know we're going to be talking about structure. And we know in Paper 2 that we're going to be doing a similar thing. So we know exactly what the questions are going to be, but we do not know the text. We do not know what extracts you're going to be given. So it's important that we practice lots of different extracts and answering those questions to different things so that you can practice then highlighting and annotating the relevant information from a brand new unseen text. You should enter the exam hall knowing the terminology and the writing structures to apply to your exam. So you know that you're going to be looking for certain things and you know exactly what format you're going to follow in answering the questions. And again, practicing your timing is very important because we give you the timings per question as guidance for how many marks you're going to get. Okay, so we should try and stick rigidly to the timing. It is not about being smart. It is a bit about being exam smart. So knowing that what questions, knowing how to answer them, knowing exactly what you need to be including to hit the marks on the mark scheme, knowing your terminology, knowing your timings, and knowing where your strengths and weaknesses are. That's something you'll be working with your teacher on. So we're going to focus on on Paper 2 now, so our non-fiction paper, and I'm going to just give you a brief overview of each question. There'll be more videos on each question in depth on how to answer them, but for this video, I'm going to give you an overview of what the questions include, and then we're going to have a go at question 1 at the end. So in this paper, the marks are slightly different to Paper 1 because question 3 is worth 12 marks and question 4 is worth 16 instead of 8 and 20. So that's the only difference as far as the marks go for the questions in Paper 2 compared to Paper 1. So this is what it will look like. You will have a reading section, which is your comprehension. So it's answering questions based on the text, and that's worth 40 marks. Your writing section, again, is worth 40 marks on its own. So it's really important because this writing section makes up 1/4 of your English language grade. And if you put it in aside alongside the writing section for language paper 1, that's 50% of your grade. It's half of your English language grade. You're going to tackle everything question by question and follow our advice. So you're going to have be given 2 sources, so extracts. The numbers down the side of the lines that you need to refer to, so it will tell you in the question where you need to look at. So specifically, you'll need to look at this part for question 1. So the first thing you do is get your pen and box it off, so it's really obvious where you're going to be referring to, because you cannot refer to things outside of the place that it's told you to look at. Check you're looking at the right source for the question as well. So if it says source A, do not use source B. So question 1, you will be answering a question that looks like this. So you'll be asked to look at source A and the first part of the source, so lines 1 to 12 in this instance, and you'll be choosing 4 statements which are true. So you're going to read through it, and then you're going to pick out 4 things that you know are true. It isn't always explicit. You need to infer information from what is written, and we'll go through that at the end of this video. So you need to always check the wording and make sure that you are reading things correctly. So fill in the box for question 1. So the focus of our question for question 1, based on what I've just said. Pause the video and fill it in, please. Okay, good. So the focus of our question in question 1 was you need to choose 4 things that are true. Question 2. In this question, you will be writing a summary. So a summary is a brief overview of something. So taking lots of information and compacting it and making it a lot shorter whilst not losing any of the main key points. Okay, so you need to read both sources for this question. So you're referring to A and B, and then you are picking out quotations that show a difference in the text or whatever it is that you've been asked to do. So you're summarizing by taking this quotation and saying what it implies. One thing we learn about source A is this, where you put your quotation in, and then what does that imply? And then you do a similar thing for source B. So you are just summarizing, you're not using language analysis, but you are referring to the text. So don't overcomplicate things, okay? This is worth 8 marks. You've got about 12 minutes. Okay, so fill in the box for question 2. So the focus of question 2, based on what I've just talked to you about, fill it in. Pause the video now. Okay, so for question 2, the focus of our question is writing a summary. So writing a comparison summary about source A and source B. Question 3. This is about language. So it's just like paper 1, question 2, except it has more marks because there's 12 marks instead of 8. You make sure to use the right source for the question. So it will refer you back to a specific source and specific lines. So again, this says 16 to 26. You would box that off with your pen and make sure you are answering from the correct part of the text, okay? The correct source and the correct lines. You cannot answer from outside these lines. Okay, so all we'll be doing here is answering about how the writer uses language to describe something. So language is just words. How does the writer use specific words and specific writer's techniques to make a point? Okay, so that's looking at our use of adjectives and use of similes, etc., just like our paper 1, question 2. Okay, so for question 3, write in the focus of the question as I've just discussed. Pause the video now. Okay, good. So for question 3, you should have written, we'll be analysing language. Question 4, you are going to compare what the authors think about something. So for this, you will be analysing language and structure, a lot like paper 1, question 4. Okay, but you are going to be specifically comparing. So looking at both texts, so the whole of source A and the whole of source B, and looking at the question. So comparing how the writers convey their different perspectives and feelings about their experiences at sea. Okay, in this instance. So focusing on both sources, the whole source, and looking at comparison writing. So before you read both sources through at the start of the exam, check this question to see what ideas you are looking at for. It saves you time in the end, gives you more time to write. Okay, so for question 4, focus of the question, write it, pause the video and write it in now. Okay, good. So for this, you should be writing a comparison about a statement. So, you know, compare how the writers compare their different perspectives. So you're going to be analysing language and structure. So question 5, you will be asked to write based on a statement. So you'll be given a statement that you'll need to argue for or against. This is a persuasive writing task. You'll be told to write in a particular form. Get this wrong and you'll be heavily penalised. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So it's really, really obvious who's done a plan. It means your writing is more coherent. It means that it flows better and you're spending less time editing because you have a plan of where you should be writing and what you should be writing. So you'll be asked to write around a statement. In this case, it is people who have extraordinary skill, courage and determination who deserve to be famous, not those who have good looks or lots of money or behave badly. So write a letter to the editor of a newspaper in which you argue your point of view in response to this statement. So as I have just said, you will be writing persuasively to argue your own point of view in response to a statement. You'll be told to write in that particular form. So in this case, it's a letter. It could be an article, a newspaper article. It could be a speech. So you need to write in that form. You'll have 24 marks for content and organisation and 16 marks for technical accuracy. So that means 24 marks for what goes into your writing and 16 marks for your spelling, punctuation and grammar. Okay, so it's 40 marks altogether. So it's a big scoring question. Okay, and remember this will always be non-fiction writing because it's language paper 2, not like creative writing from language paper 1 where you write a description or a narrative story. Okay. So take a minute just to fill in focus of the question for question 5, please, and pause the video now. Okay, so for question 5, the focus of the question, we should have written something like writing to persuade, non-fiction, writing against a statement, to argue for or against in a particular form, so speech, letter, etc. So let's have a go at completing question 1. So get your exam paper in front of you and turn to question 1. So what I want you to do is I want you to have a look through the extract in front of you, so lines 1 to 12, which we've been asked to refer to. This is from Ben Fogle and James Cracknell's 7-week race across the Atlantic Ocean in a rowing boat called the Spirits. In their book, The Crossing, Ben describes what happened one night as he rowed and James slept. So have a look through the extract and have a go at shading in the 4 statements that you think are true. So I'll read the extract to you. It was still dark. We had at least 3 hours of darkness to go before daybreak, and as always, I had the sunrise shift. The ocean had continued to build with an ever-increasing wind that was gusting at 40 knots. The swell had grown and conditions were becoming increasingly frenzied. I began to feel vulnerable again. If we can just make it to daybreak, I thought, it will be easier to read the waves and prepare for the breakers. Our boat was brand spanking new and bought it straight from the race organisers. It had coped with the seas we had experienced thus far incredibly well. I rode on, worried by the deteriorating weather, and I thought of my wife back at home. I longed to be with her and away from this intimidating ocean. As I rode, a barely perceptible blue hue appeared on the skyline. Okay, so based on that, we now need to choose 4 statements that are true. So have a read, have a look at the question and pause the video now, and then we'll go through the answers. Okay, so here are the answers. So you're choosing 4 statements which are true from what we've just read. It would be dark for another 3 hours. Well, we know that's true because here in line 1, it says we have at least 3 hours of darkness to go before daybreak. So that one's pretty straightforward. Ben usually rode the sunrise shift. We know that is true because it says on lines 1 and 2, as always, I had the sunrise shift. Again, that's quite explicit. That's one of the easier ones. So the waves were starting to calm down. Well, we know that's not true because it says here that the swell had grown and the conditions were becoming frenzied. Okay, the ocean had continued to build. So that's showing that it's amping up, not calming down. Okay, so it was the first time during the race that Ben felt that he was at risk. Okay, I began to feel vulnerable again. Now that's on line 4. So again implies that it's already happened, which means this is probably not true. Okay, if it were night, Ben thought he would be able to judge the danger. So here, if we could just make it to daybreak, I thought it would be easier to read the waves and prepare for the breakers. That's on line 4 and 5. So to me, that's true. Ben felt homesick. We know that is true. Now, this is not explicit. It says here, I thought of my wife back at home, around line 10, and I longed to be with her and away from this ocean. So that's not explicit. That's not Ben saying he is homesick. That's Ben inferring that he's homesick because he's saying that he misses his wife and he wants to be back at home and that he longs to be with her. So from that, we can establish that he probably feels homesick. Okay, so this is where it gets tricky. It's not always going to say the exact words that you're looking for. You need to take the information and make inferences from the information. You need to almost be detective and think, what does that imply? Okay, so Ben was enjoying this early morning shift. He's not enjoying it, is he? At all. And there was no sign of daybreak, so that's not true because it says at the bottom on line 11 and 12, as I rode, a barely perceptible blue hue appeared on the skyline. So that's the sun rising. Okay, so therefore we know that one is not true, but that's again inference because it's not explicitly saying it. It's you looking at the language used to make your own mind up. Okay, so make sure that you've checked all these off. Make sure that you have the correct answers. And that is the overview of language paper 2 questions and looking at language paper 2 question 1.